Hello, everybody. All right. So, Cardo. Hello, Cardo. Cardo says, Hi, Eddie. I hope you're doing well. I am. Thank you. I've noticed that since I started doing your routines, my embouchure is slightly mutating as if I am using less pressure now. It feels a bit weird. Is that normal? Um, I would have to know how you were playing before, but just talking in generalities, I would say it can be pretty normal if the routines are doing what they're supposed to do. Think about it. The whole concept of these routines is to help you find your most natural embouchure. And it's supposed to do that without you even knowing. That's the beauty of it. Without you even knowing, without you don't have to say, oh, I'm going to try this embouchure, I'm going to try that embouchure. No, you just do the exercises, and whatever embouchure is most natural to you, you will start to gravitate towards that. And if what you're doing normally, if what you were doing before is not so much your most natural embouchure, then yes, you could see a change in how much pressure you're using, and you could have quite a bit of a weird feel. So, so yes, I would have to say that the answer would be yes. That could be normal, just not definitively so. It really does depend on where you were before you started. Hello, Seppo. Nice to see you. Palace says, do you have any tips on practicing the All-State Jazz like etudes? Yes, I do have tips. Slow it down. Slow down. Everybody is in such a hurry. Uh, be organized about it. You know how much you have to practice and spread it out over that time. You've got 3 etudes and 2 improv. The way to not do that is to say, let me get it all learned now. That's what so many of you are doing. Let me learn it as fast as possible. So that, and I think that the philosophy behind that is that if you learn it now, you can fix all the problems later. And the truth is, you can't fix problems. I think maybe that's the fundamental flaw in that let's get it done quick approach, is that you think that you can fix the problems that you have. So the biggest uh, tip I have on practicing that music is go slow. There's 2 old sayings that people used to say that apply to this. First one is slow and steady wins the race. I don't know where that comes from, but let's look it up real quick. It's an old wisdom. I think it probably goes back to uh, slow and steady wins the race. Well, that doesn't help me at all. Okay. Okay. Aesop. That's what I thought. You can trace slow and steady wins the race all the way back to Aesop. Yeah, tortoise and the hare, right? tortoise in the hare. And then the other thing, the other old saying that can help you to do better on your etudes is look before you leap. Be careful. And the best way to be careful is to listen to the etudes dozens of times before you practice them. That's the best way to be careful. Hello, Karen. Now, as far as specific tips, like on how to do a shake and stuff like that, the shakes, I always tell my students to do that page out of the Arbin book. I was just looking at that earlier with another student. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Arbin 22. Now, not all the Arbin books have the same page numbering. This would be page 44, exercises number 22 and 23. Anyway, if you have other more specific questions, I can answer some specific questions about the etudes. Karen says, "Hi Eddie, do you think it's okay to play the same horn outside as inside? I noticed that one of my valves stuck outside that never stuck inside." You know, some horns are more sensitive to the weather, right? So that's a very personal thing, but I'll tell you what happens is it has to do with humidity and temperature. So let's take a look at temperature, right? And it's not that cold or hot necessarily changes how the horn plays, but the differentiation between the two, right? So the valves are made out of two different kinds of metal. At the inside, the piston is not the same as the valve casing. And as the horn heats up and cools off, you're going to have pushing and pulling on the tightness. They call it a tolerance, right? The tolerance between that gap. So you have the cylinder and the piston inside of it. What is the area, the distance between the piston and the cylinder? If it's tight, everybody wants a tight one, right? The problem is with the tight ones, you can have problems with playing inside and outside. I'll bet $5 that the instrument that stuck outside is probably newer than the other instrument, because older instruments tend to get looser. That area between the piston and the valve casing gets spread out, spread out, spread out. And now the changes in temperature aren't going to have an effect on how well the valves work. So yes, that only really happens when you have tight valves. Now there are other issues. There are issues with, you can have issues with dirt. You can have issues with humidity, and if you have low humidity, the oil can evaporate faster. I think that's how that works. That's how it seems to me. So Palace says, Okay, thank you. Well, you're welcome. Karen says, we are playing outside tonight. We'll see. I cleaned it. Good. That's good. Yeah, that's good. All right, let me check if there were any questions that came in. Oh, I got a new student. That's great. What a weird request. Someone wants to turn one of my duets into a quartet. Wow. Okay. I don't see any questions. Any other questions from you guys now? I do have a gig tonight, and I did not get much sleep last night. So if this putters out, I won't be upset about it. All right. I did have a question on one of the Allstate videos. I did have a question about how to swing better. And I might make a video separately for that, but let's talk about it here while we wait for someone else to ask a question. The question was, how can I make my swing better? And the most important thing is to listen to swing music. Listen to the we usually start with Count Basie and Duke Ellington, but you know what? Nowadays we have to be careful when we make that suggestion, because I don't think that if you listen to the Count Basie and Duke Ellington from 100 years ago, I don't think that's as beneficial. You know, don't get me wrong, all of it is beneficial. I said it's not as beneficial. It comes down to what is it you're trying to accomplish. And if you start off with that old timey stuff, might not help you so much with what you're trying to do now. In fact, it might actually push you in the wrong direction. So you want to listen to some of the more modern recordings of those bands. You can kind of tell when you listen to it how old it is. So yes, be careful, but we usually start with that. But the main thing is that if you want to be better at swing, you got to have an idea in your head what that sounds like. And I'm going to say that one more time. If you want to perfect your swing, perfect what? You know, if someone says to you, "I want you to paint a portrait of my grandmother," and you've never met this person's grandmother, how are you going to do such a thing? Right? It's the same thing. If you don't know what swing sounds like, you have to actually train yourself to hear what that sounds like. So that's the first thing. I also start my students, and this doesn't help people who don't sign up for lessons, but I do have a series of exercises you can do. That sounds all wrong, doesn't it? Hey, you want to learn how to swing? Here's some exercises. They're not really exercises, they're like two measure etudes. Um, so yes, if you were to take lessons with me, I could get you set up with a series of two measure phrases where I put all the slurs and we play it back and forth. I play it, you play it, I play it, you play it, I play it, you play it. And it does a wonderful job. I think it's 3 pages long. It does a wonderful job. The students that could not swing beforehand can swing afterwards. I'm not saying they're always amazing afterwards. Sometimes they are amazing afterwards, but it's always better than it was. Um, so yes, now we're talking about the slurs. Uh, Generally speaking, now you have to break this rule because when you follow the rule too much, it doesn't sound like swing, it sounds like an exercise. But generally speaking, you slur the upbeat to the downbeat. A lot of people start with the rhythm of the swing. I don't do that. Start with the slur. Start with the articulation. Do ba do ba do ba do ba do ba do ba do. Okay? Slur the upbeat to the downbeat. Always tongue the upbeat for this stage. What now? I told you the rule for that. You want to break that rule often enough so that it doesn't get predictable. Anyway, so Seppo says, I perhaps will try to establish a marching drill based on your American trumpet suite next summer. How do you think would it be possible to widen the instrumentation for that with sousaphone? Um, yeah, I'm very uncomfortable with. It's like what I just told you about this. Someone just sent me a request in an email. They want to change my duet into a quartet. And yeah, I don't know. I guess, you know what? I guess I would have to hear what the end result looks like. That said, if you're asking me how I feel about it, uh, that's really not an issue, right? If if you write an arrangement, then it's technically an arrangement of my composition. So um, yeah, so I really shouldn't have a problem with it. I don't know why it freaks me out. I don't know why. So let's say the official answer is yes, go ahead and do that. Um, I'm not so sure what my reservations are about that. There is a weirdness that I experience when someone asks me. This is not the first time. The email I just read right now. That's not the first time I've ever seen this. There are people. Usually, what it is, I have that one piece that everybody likes so much. It's a Palm Sunday piece for 8 trumpets. Um, and I had a request, can we do it with 4? Who's to say no? I mean, and so it was a church, and I guess they did it with 4 trumpets. Someone got in there and kind of cut different parts out and stuff like that. Um, the whole point of that piece is that there's a mesh. I call it a mesh when you have overlapping sections and how do you have the mesh and the melody at the same time if it's only 4 trumpets? I don't know. But if it works for the audience, then I guess I don't have. Yeah, Cardo. Hello, Cardo. Cardo says, Eddie, should we take a break before we practice music after the routine? Also, should we respect the rest as much as during music practice? Yes, both answers to that is yes, let's say ideally, if you're doing the system correctly. Now, your first question, should there be a break between your routine and practicing the music? Ideally, there should be. This week, I'm guilty of not doing that. This week, I'm guilty of finishing the routine and going right into my practice, the music practice. So even I break that rule. Let me tell you this, I regret, not regret, regret's not the right word. I don't like doing it like that. I should have waited, but I didn't have time. Now, the second half of that, when you're practicing music, you should always have a proven practice technique. All proven practice techniques include repetition. And when you do that repetition, between each repetition, you should sing and finger what you just played. So if I'm playing, then I'm going to sing and finger. Do, do, da, ba, da, wo, de, re, ba, dum. Do, do, da, ba, da, do, de, de, ba, dum. When you sing and finger, you get some ear training, but you also get the horn off of your chops, and you're getting the fingers. So it's a beautiful thing to do. This where you sing and finger and then play. Sing and finger and then play. Sing and finger and play. Back and forth like that. It's one of the most important processes that I teach. Because of all the benefits that you get the benefit of having the horn off your chops, you get the benefit of training your ears, you get the benefit of working on the fingers, you get the benefit also of slowing the process down. You know, that I can't talk about that enough. I can't talk about that enough. Slowing the process down always produces better results. When we're practicing, slower is always better. Now, in this case, I'm talking about slowing the process down. Slowing the music down is also better. Anyway, Trumpet Tradesman says, "Hey, Eddie, I love your teaching. If I had to ask a question, it would have to do with tempo. I seem to struggle with that. I'm still on book one, Sigmund Herring, because I'm not happy with my tempo. I don't mean tempo in general. I guess I mean tapping my foot while I'm playing. It's very frustrating. Besides constant practicing, is there a cure for this problem? I feel like a drummer." uh, how do you stop tapping your foot? So here's the thing. First of all, that tempo should be from within. A lot of times, okay, well, you know what? Let me back up first. And I got a question for you. Are you practicing with a metronome? If you're not practicing with a metronome, then there's nothing really for us to talk about. Okay? Because without the metronome, you are like a leaf being blown around in the wind. Okay? I still use the metronome, so don't let what I'm saying now make it sound like I don't use the metronome anymore. I still use the metronome. I just don't use it as much. So when I'm talking about this stuff, what I'm about to say, keep in mind that I've pulled back on it after 30 years. 30 years. Okay? I don't use it as much as I used to, but for 30 years of my life, that metronome was on almost all the time. I don't like to use it in exercises. So if we're playing, like for example, my routine, if you're doing my routine, don't do the metronome. Uh, and you know what? Part of the problem today is that most of my students are online and the metronome does not work with online lessons. So I have gotten out of practice of using the metronome with the students. But up until we started doing most of the lessons online, that metronome, this one here, would sit on my music stand and the students would play with that. I would play with that. It would be on constantly. Like I said, I've gotten out of that practice just because of the online lessons. Trumpet Tradesman says, I try to practice with a metronome. I think I set the tempo too fast. I'll try to slow it down even more. I get your leaf analogy. So, yes, always slower is better. Now, why did I say metronome? What's the best? If we're talking about trying to stop tap your foot, trying to stop tapping your foot, um, the reason you're tapping your foot is because you're looking for the tempo. When we use the metronome for like I told you, you know what? Let me tell you this story. I was in it was a weird situation because I had 5 years of college at UTEP. Then I took a couple years off. Then I had a year at University of Houston. So that's already 6 years of college. Then I went to a junior college, like into my 7th year of university at a junior college. That's weird, right? Anyway, now I did that because the guy that I wanted to take trumpet lessons with, that's where he was teaching. So you get a better rate. I wasn't there to really join any ensembles or anything like that, but I ended up getting into the jazz band. By that time, I was already an established pro, an established jazz player in Houston. Not as established as I would be later, but getting gigs, being on everybody's list and getting called, and doing jazz gigs and other related gigs like that. So here I am in a junior college jazz ensemble as a professional jazz player. And the director was talking to the rhythm section and said that during my solo, the rhythm section was trying too hard to keep time. And he said that when you're playing with me, you know, he actually said my name, Eddie Lewis. He said, when you're playing with Eddie Lewis, he says, Eddie Lewis is the time. He said, Eddie Lewis is the time. So you don't have to work so hard to keep the time. Now, where did that come from? How did I have such good time that the band director told these other guys to slack off? Don't try so hard to be in time. Where did I get that? I got that from many, many, many years of playing with the metronome. That's why the metronome is so important. Because when we have that internal sense of time, It makes everybody else's job easier. And that's where you get that. So the problem of tapping your foot is usually there because you're not feeling the tempo inside. You don't have that internal clock that's beating at that regular tempo. Okay? So if you want to make that go away, then you spend that time with the metronome. Like every time you have a piece of music, it's got to be with the metronome. Okay, so there is one exception, of course. If that music that you're practicing does not have time, or if the time is not consistent, right? Let's say you're practicing a ballad that's not supposed to be in strict time. It's supposed to have rubato, right? That's the word we use for that, rubato. Um, then you wouldn't use the metronome for that. Everything else you're going to use the metronome for. He says, got it. I hear you loud and clear. I was born with 2 left feet, but I was blessed with chops to work with. Wonderful. And then he says, thank you. Well, you're welcome. Any other questions? Any other questions? That's the nice thing about chai tea is it tastes okay when it's cold. All right. Any other questions? You know what's amazing to me, and I say this every year. We did have one, right? Palace asked about the jazz etudes. Um, it's amazing that more of these kids. There should be thousands of these kids working on these etudes, and we'd rarely ever get any questions. Trumpet Tradesman says, I feel I have many questions for you, but I'm going to go practice. Have a good holiday weekend. Is it a holiday? Oh, I guess it is holiday weekend. All right. Seppo says, this might be a bit off topic, but if there are some famous American composer fairy tale or composed fairy tales which are popular there and performable with band or a chamber group. Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I've been so far out of the band world lately. Um, so I'm not in touch with what's happening with the band stuff. So isn't there a piece about Paul Bunyan? Let me. There's an operetta, Paul Bunyan Overture. Yeah, I wouldn't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. You know who might know more is Karen. Langley, hello Langley, says, Eddie, if I'm having trouble with an entire piece, should I work on the main thing I struggle with, or should I work from the beginning? Um, I never work from the beginning. Well, I shouldn't say never. I rarely work from the beginning. We usually work from the end. And my students know this because that's one of the very first things that I teach. It's called working backwards. Um, I would not work from the beginning. So let's get that established right away. Start at the end. Learn the ending first. Learn. We go usually in, depending on how hard it is, we go in 2 measures, 4 measure chunks. But yes, you start at the end, work your way to the beginning. Never, ever, ever start at the beginning. Well, I keep saying never. I have to keep correcting myself. There are rare exceptions. I do this in ensembles too. On the occasion when I do teach ensembles, and I do every once in a while, um, we always rehearse from the end first and then work our way to the beginning. Always. And I won't get into the reasons about that right now. Yes, so if the problem you're having, I think what you're trying to say is there's no specific part that you're having issues with. You just want to be able to play the whole thing. Okay, so Langley says, thank you, my band director never really made that clear. He's not going to make that clear. This is not what most people teach. This is my method. So don't be confused and think that there's a right way to do stuff and a wrong way to do stuff, and that the people in the know the right way and the people who are struggling are doing it wrong. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. I'm not saying that the way I teach is the right way. I'm not saying that the way I teach is the way. The way I teach, so when you, and also let's be clear about this Q&A. You're asking me the questions. We're not asking the trumpet god or a trumpet demigod for the right answers. You're asking me, okay? There is no trumpet god. There is no trumpet hero. All right, there are only opinions about this stuff. There's a whole bunch of reasons why you should not start at the beginning. Most of it, the most important reason is because of how much time it takes to do it. The most important reason is the time you save when you work from the ending. So part of it is a practical thing. There's also musical reasons. There's also mental reasons. Okay. But the truth is 99% of all the music teachers out there don't know about this. And the irony of it is that I didn't make it up. This is not something I made up. It was taught to me in El Paso in the 80s. It was taught to me in El Paso in the 80s. I looked it up. It's a technique that's over 200 years old. People have been using that technique for over 200 years. So it's not like I've got this new weird thing. Virtuosos have been working from the end since forever. So it's not like I had some weird idea and now everybody should just work from the end. No, this is something I learned from other musicians, and it's something that's been handed down for hundreds of years. It just happens that our generation doesn't know anything about it. And I think part of that has to do with the culture, right? Our culture doesn't want to do repetition. So Seppo says, I am speaking about like the Prokofiev's wolf story, Peter and the Wolf story. Are there American relatives to that? I don't know. I don't think so. Not to my knowledge. Karen says we played the Wizard of Oz and Grease and concert band, not exactly fairy tales. All right. Any other questions? You know, this this philosophy that people have that there's people in the know in the trumpet world. They know how to make things work. It's it's a fundamental flaw in the way we think. It's a fundamental flaw. And yes, I know. See, that's the thing is by having the philosophy that I have, I actually diminish the value of what I have to say in those people's eyes. I know that. I never expected a huge following like some other people, right? Because I actually tell people um, nobody can answer some of these questions for you. You know, it's sort of like that Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, right? And he says, "What's in my pocket?" That's not a riddle. And the guy that knows what's in your pocket, that's if he says, "Oh, I know what's in your pocket," he's scamming you. Seppo says, "Would you be interested in composing a fairy tale for a narrator and trumpet ensemble?" I could do something like that. I could do something like that. I've never really done anything with narration before. I've thought about it for a long, long time. But yeah, I could do something like that. So yeah, this thing I'm talking about with and it's part of how we think today, right? It's part of we think this way about medicine, we think this way about school, and we see it in the news all the time. They say, well, let's see what the experts have to say. What is that really supposed to mean? You know, in the Bible, I don't remember which verse it is, but the Apostle Paul says the, and I forget which word he used, whether it was righteous or holy. I think it's righteous. He says, the more righteous I become, the more I realize I'm not righteous at all. And I've noticed this with most fields. I notice it with myself as a trumpet player, that the better you get at what you're doing, the more you realize you don't really know much. But what we've taken in our society today is we have a system now that operates on this false idea that people do know much. Those are the people you should not trust. The ones who do know. You know, if you visit somebody else's Q and A, and there's a question that was answered, and I didn't give you an answer, so you go to another Q and they say, "Oh yes, yes, I have the answer." Don't trust those people because that's not how life works. That's not how life works. There are no experts. There is no such thing as an expert. I think we should all start letting that sink in. Your doctor is not an expert. If the doctor behaves as if he's an expert, then he's not listening to you. He's not sensitive to you. It's the same way with the trumpet lessons. We go to the trumpet teacher, he's the master. Don't question him. Do what he says. And when it doesn't work, it's your fault. There are no experts. What we have, and what I try to do with this Q&A, with the lessons, with all my teaching material, what I try to do is work with you to get where you want to go. That's the underlying philosophy of my whole approach. I'm going to work with you to help you get where you want to go. I don't have to be an expert to do that. So the reason why they do this expert stuff is to assign to themselves a false value, an inflated false value. Does that make sense? Anyway, any other questions? Cardo says, Eddie, I'm enjoying your book. Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I always love to hear that. It gives me a sense of direction, he says. There's so many people that say that what they like about the book is that it's got structure, that they like the structure. And yes, I can see the giving a sense of direction. I can see that. All right. Then he says, like I accomplished something every day. Thank you very much. You're welcome. That book I started writing it in like 89 and finished it in 90. Over the years, I can write books so much faster now because I've done it so many times. Now, I'm not saying it takes less work. I think the work is actually more now because I take it more seriously than I did before. So don't get me wrong. But I'm more organized about it now. Back in the old days, that first book, The Physical Trumpet Pyramid, took me something like 3 years to write. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, something like 3 years. Now, if I want, I could sit down and have a book. Now, part of that also is that I have, if you were to look at my folder, let me look. I'm going to actually count. I have a folder called Current Projects. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So let's say it's kind of dragging right now. I can't see the whole thing. And this is not just ideas that I've had. I have a separate folder for ideas. These are all books that are started already that I haven't completed. So it looks like, I don't know, over 20. My computer's dragging, so I can't really count them all. But yeah, it looks like over 20 books I've already started and haven't finished. So that does speed things up just a little bit because the material is already there. I'm 60 years old now. There's a good chance I might not ever get to some of these now. Not because I'm not saying I'm old enough that I'm going to die soon. I'm just saying that some of these aren't a big priority. The older I get, the less certain things matter so much. Anyway, we'll ask one more question. And then we'll do one more question, and then I'm gonna to sign off, try to get some sleep before this gig tonight. So do we have any more questions? Okay, maybe not. All right, well, thank you guys. We'll probably do this again next week. Summer is a little bit weird because we have a lot of people wanting to take lessons on the weekend. So we'll see how that goes. All right, well, we'll see you. Have a great weekend, and God bless you, and we'll see you on the next one.